Thank you very much. So I'm going to get this out of the way from the very get-go. I work for the Sun. I'm really sorry. Technically, it's the technology department, so I don't read anything and proofread anything, but I do have to interact with them every day. So yeah, I'm here today to talk to you about Agile in the business, or more specifically, teaching an old dog new tricks. The reason why I kind of use that is the newspaper business is actually really, really old. So, speaking, I work for News UK. So it's a media brand that owns The Times, it owns The Sun, HarperCollins, TalkSport Wireless. It owns a huge amount of media brands. Some of those are really, really old. A little bit of trivia, when you do your induction, you have to play a board game. It's kind of forced fun, and one of the questions on there is how old The Times is, and it's actually 1798 or something stupid. It's really, really old. So you can imagine some of the people there aren't quite that old, but have certainly been working in the newspaper business for decades, which makes it very hard to talk about Agile and technology. But yeah. So about 2 years ago, I joined September 2016, and there was kind of quite a big shift at that point, because technology was really seen as a supplier. It was like hey, we need to go do this project, let's go to technology and ask them to do this, or we could go outside and go do that. It wasn't really seen as much of a partner, or even just something that was just another part of the business. But the stars kind of aligned a little bit, so we had a change in leadership. Rebecca Brooks came back, I'm sorry. But there was a new CTO, new senior leadership team. We formed programs around certain areas, so I formed around kind of the Sun, so around those business units. We had that cross-functional leadership, so we tried to set ourselves up in the right way, but we still had that relationship with the business. And stereotypes are really, really common. That's how we were seen. We were seen as, oh, you're just the ones that look after the data center, you're just the ones that fix my computer, not the ones that develop and maintain the websites and actually drive digital media. And we heard a lot of this. Why can't you just build it? Just stop, do that, and do this. Like, this was the common things that we heard so often, because there was such a lack of understanding about how we worked, why we did things the way we did, or why we wanted to do things the way we did. One of the first things that I kind of inherited a few projects at the time, and this was what our velocity was like. And I kind of read that, and I think for those of you that kind of experience with Agile, it kind of looks something like this. Stop this, do that. Or stop that, do this. And then everyone kind of goes down. It's like, oh, actually, it doesn't really work. We need to ramp up again. Okay, we're getting used to it. Let's do it again. And then this would happen again, and again, and again, and again, and again. And eventually I started just calling it the crazy snake, because it looks like a bit of a snake. I thought that was funny. Anyway, we needed to make a change. We need to make quite a significant change. So once you kind of got your feet under the table and kind of figure this stuff out. Media is an old business, so you need to understand it. As I kind of said, the Times is 200 years old. The Sun's coming up to 50-year anniversary, and you should hear some of the ideas they're trying to think of for that. But they're very particular about how they work. So just kind of give you some insight as how the Sun works, the digital newsroom. They produce 600 pieces of content per day on the Sun website. There's 600 pieces of content a day. A lot of it is shit. In fact, all of it is shit, if I was honest. Don't quote me on that. No one else is from the Sun is here. A lot of it is shit. Some of it's all right. But a lot of it is shit, right? But 600 pieces of content, can you imagine? 600 pieces of content per day, the images, the sub-editing, the fact-checking, haha, right? There's about 7 per journalist. So there's, I think it's, what equates to something like 100 and something journalists, I don't know. But there's editing, subbing, curation, etc., how they lay the pages and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff that's going on all the time. In fact, they move faster than we do, which is pretty impressive, right? But there's some takeaways that you can have from that. A lot is produced very quickly. That's what they're used to. They're used to producing a lot of things really, really fast. So they assume everyone else can do it, right? Why can't you produce it as fast as I do? I produce 7 pieces of content a day. Why aren't you producing 7 websites a day? Right? Things change and updated often. One of the things that the Sun is actually very, very good at, and I hate to be proud of this, they're very, very quick at stuff that happens. So when Germany got kicked out earlier on, we were the first, which means we get first on SEO, which means we get first on Facebook Instant Articles, we get first on AMP. It's part of what our business is. We're very, very quick. But then, of course, you have to update it afterwards. It's quite common that there's over 100 edits on an article on average. And the culture, therefore, is very, very different. Lots change, they edit constantly. Those are really key takeaways to understand when you try and engage with a group of people like this. So how do we get started? So one of the things that I inherited was a really badly done WordPress site. And it did the top to bottom, and I don't have anything against WordPress. We still use WordPress today as our CMS. But I inherited a project that was done really, really badly in about 4 months, and it top to bottom changed the newsroom. And we said, okay, what we need to go and do is go do this again. And kind of embarking on such a journey means that you really need to engage with your stakeholders properly. If we're going to change some of the CMS workflows, change the way that the website works, think about a digital future, we need to engage them. So we tried to do a bit of everything, actually, to get them on board, the way that technology works and change the way that we interact with them. So we started being transparent. So we said, this is what we're doing, this is why we want to do it, this is how we work, etc. Coaching conversations, trying to find those champions and get them on side and say, hey, get involved in this session and you'll help us with this and help us with that. Finding a champion, as I said, we've got some key people in there that are still pretty key today. Digital editor, people who've been there for 20 years, funnily enough, but are only 36, which is really scary. They've lived their life in the sun. But they actually can be really, really helpful finding some of those champions. Training and teaching. Now, actually, when you start having some of those conversations with people and saying, well, look, this is the way we work, this is the why it works that way, they start a little bit interesting, so we can start teaching them. And then focus on examples that did work. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Do you want me to go back? That'd be helpful. There you go. So I'm sure this will get sent around off. Don't worry. 2 things seemed to work for us in my kind of first 6 months or so, as we were kind of firefighting. Training and using real examples. So they're a practical bunch, they produce a lot, they want to see real examples. It's a lot easier to teach someone. I think we can all relate to this when you're doing something that's actually real, right? It's not kind of in theory. But how do you train a 300 plus newsroom? So yes, there's about 100 or so editors, journalists, etc., but there's a lot of support staff, there's a lot of fact checkers, there's a lot of people running around, trying to steal voicemails. But there are all sorts of guides and training materials. I'll stop it, I promise. But there are all sorts of guides and training materials. Anyone who's kind of works in the Agile space, and I think the guys were talking about this before. There's books, there's all this type of stuff, blog posts, all this kind of stuff. But how am I going to teach it? There's Agile Manifesto, all this kind of crap, right? There's a lot of stuff out there. It's not practical to take all those people through this type of stuff. And there's also, to be fairly honest with you, some of this isn't going to work for them. Their culture is really different, as I said. And our culture is slightly different to other stuff. I think, there was a comment that made a minute ago that it's a toolkit, right? What works for us. So we decided, we made our own. So it was a bit, kind of, again, another one of those stars aligned things. We were really struggling to hire talent. Who would have thought of the sun? I promise I'll stop. But we've found actually that culturally we wanted certain types of people. You want people that are passionate, you want people that can be empowered, you want people that care about what they want to do. I can teach any one of you in this room to run a stand-up mechanically, but can I teach you to really understand the fundamentals of how that works? That's pretty bloody hard, right? So we came up with the idea of an Agile Academy. And it was, like I said, originally the idea was that we'd hire university graduates, we'd bring them on board, we'd teach them mechanically how to run, agile processes, and they'd be the kind of leaders of the future, right? Core purpose, develop raw talent, leaders of the future. We developed it in-house, because actually that's the way we want to work, right? We want to work in a certain way, so we cater it to how we wanted to work, we slant it to our culture. But what we did is we opened it up to all and we integrated it to learning and development, which I think is quite synergy with the guy I was talking before. We integrated this learning and development. This is, News UK is part of News Corp and the kind of shenanigans that go with that, which means we have a huge learning and development department. The amount of times I get sent emails going, hey, you've got to do this GDPR training, go through this slideshow and you're now approved. We integrated it as part of that process. This is a training course that is now available to anyone across the entire business. And there's lots of different ways that you can integrate into that. You do kind of the open days, you do the brown bag sessions, you do the posters everywhere, you kind of, stand outside the bar that we've got on the 14th floor and say, hey, you want to come and join my Agile Academy? Which sounds a bit weird now to say that, but yeah, it's an open course. Anyone can do it. And it looks something a bit like this. This is the first one. We wanted to teach people the basics, so planning, estimation, backlog refinement, retrospectives, stand-ups, velocity, health checks and tools. And there's a bit of stuff about culture and fundamentals in that. which gave me the great pleasure of going and buying about £300 worth of Lego off of eBay to achieve this. But actually, we can wrap that up all in about a day. It's run by different people. It's open to everyone. And the first way that we ran it was we had our kind of university graduates that were going through this, and we invited key people from the business that we wanted to attend this. Said, look, you've got PDR seasons coming up, you want to do some learning and development, we'll come to this course and you get a big tick and you learn some stuff along the way, right? So that's what we did. We even did an advanced program. None of the editorial staff have been across this, and I wouldn't really expect them to, but just to show that it actually exists and it kind of works. Right, so I want to get on to the next thing now, finding an example project. So I referred earlier on that when I first joined, we kind of inherited this really nasty WordPress site that had been done in about 3-4 months. Fonts were all over the place, breakpoints were all over the place, certain things didn't work. The Sun isn't just the Sun either, it's also Scotland Island, Dream Team, TalkSport now, and Virgin Radio soon as well. It's a lot of stuff that gets run off the same platform. Each one of those has its own look and feel, its own style guide, its own font. It's crazy. And if you don't scale properly and have proper component libraries, pattern libraries, etc., it just doesn't work. So we weren't set up to have a digital future, to be honest with you. And with print in decline, just didn't work. So we had to rebuild it. We had to start kind of almost from scratch. So when you do something like that, you need to look to the experts in those areas. And editorial, for better or worse, really know their audience. They really know what works from the perspective of content, how to present that content, so on and so forth. So we rebuilt the Sun platform again. This is kind of something that I think most people in this room have seen a version of, finding that MVP. And if I kind of refer back to one of the first slides, I was talking about, why can't you just do this? Why can't you just build the site? We did it in 3 months before. Just take another 3 months and do it again. It's like, no, actually that's shit. So we have to do it properly this time. And we need to think about things like where you want to be in 2 years' time when the World Cup comes up and you want to do some really fancy, page and you don't have the tools or capabilities to do that. But at the same time, I don't want to see you in 2 years' time when it's ready. I want to deliver value along the way, because actually we'll learn from that value and you'll get something in the interim and you'll inevitably change your mind, because that's what you can do, because you're the digital editor, and that's okay. But you need to go through that. Teaching people that is really, really hard. So you need to take them through a bit of a journey. You need to take the business with you, and you need to really respect the fact that they're culturally very, very different. So we're on a bit of a journey with the business. We were quite fortunate enough that we did get the buy-in from Rebecca and Christina, who's our CTO, and a few others to go, look, if the print is in decline, we need to set up a digital business. How do we do that? How do we ensure that we do that? So we had a technology-led project that really gave us an opportunity to go, hey, you know what, digital editor, I need you in this room. Like, I need you in this room commercial, I need you in this room marketing, I need you in this room. So we had at least that buy-in to go, you will come to these sessions. But then when we actually ran it, or I ran a lot of these, say, okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to use some post-it notes and we're going to do this. No, in all seriousness, we started running this as an Agile project and getting them bought into this. And because we had the Agile Academy to back that stuff up, although we're like, oh yeah, I went to the course on this and I got my certificate, it's very fun. But they really actually started to understand, hey, I know about this because we talked about it. And I went to the stand-up where we talked about that issue where AMP didn't work for 24 hours and we don't talk about that anymore, but that's what happened. We went through those phases where they found, well, how do I find this out? How do I figure out what you've done over the past 2 weeks? Oh, I come to a showcase. Showcases are for this. Oh, okay, well, we should have a retro about, how those showcases didn't work particularly well. Oh, yeah, it's starting to kind of almost by osmosis, because you've been chipping away at this stuff for so long, it really, really worked. So when you start doing something in anger and you're really working on a project, all of a sudden the puzzle pieces start to fit in and it starts to make sense for them. So yeah, start figuring out the Agile project. It's quite an easy segue then to get other people onto the course as well. So when they kind of go, oh, you need to talk to the sports editor for this because we need to think about what we're going to do for the World Cup in a couple of years and it's going to look like this or look like that. It's quite a nice, easy segue to get people onto those courses. So just to briefly kind of touch on this, we kept it simple for them as well, because you need to keep it simple for journalists. Didn't make a Sun joke there that time. So we simply said, okay, we're going to re-platform this. What's the objective? What's the work they have to do for that? And we use really quite clever wording. We didn't use things like, oh yeah, we need to have a build pipeline that's going to do this, and then we're going to have a component library. We tried to be quite clever about what tasks and what things, but we kept it with the idea of what's the benefit that you get out of this? What are you going to get at the end of that work? What's the objective? Think KPIs, OKRs, that type of thing. What's the work you're going to do to try and achieve that? And what am I going to get out of it? I ended up looking something a bit like this. There was a big wall that was probably as long as this. I think there were about 11 slices in the end that we kind of went through. And as you can see at the top, key capabilities, that's your objectives, right? What are we going to do? Well, there's some site re-architecture, there's some performance stuff, there's some platform stuff. And then at the bottom is like, here's what you get out of it at the end. And that was just up in the wall. That was actually on the Sun editorial floor, because we camped up there for a little while. And it was quite good because people then walk past it and they go, well, what is this about? Well, look at that, and that's what you're going to get. And they're like, oh, okay, cool, it makes sense. So keeping the language simple was really, really important. And using kind of those same terms, etc., really, 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 really strong. I'm just conscious of time. This isn't a one-time fix. I've been there for 2 years and I still struggle with this on a daily basis. It's never going to stop with the rest of the business, and I think certainly editorial, you know, they again work in a very, very different culture, so your mileage may vary depending on what sort of business you work in, but it isn't a one-time fix. So there's some kind of key learnings that we took this. Keep things simple and transparent. We adopted things like vision cards, user story mapping, you know, the terms that I kind of used before about objectives, you know, kind of benefits, that sort of thing. It was really good. Be tenacious. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I know that phrase gets used a lot, but I've been there for 2 years. I'm still having this struggle. Why can't you just do this? Just stop doing that and do this. Well, you just wasted 2 months of work and now I'm going to have to do this. It still does happen. In fact, it happened today where I had to review a contract by 11 o'clock tomorrow for a deadline that's now set for September. Like, you know, thank you very much, commercial. But it happens, right? But that doesn't mean you can't chip away at it. Doesn't mean you can't keep up and be tenacious about this stuff. Have compassion and understanding. This is one thing that I do complain a lot about. We seem to be the only people that have compassion for everyone else, but you have to be that guy. If you want to make the world a better place, you have to put yourself out there and be pretty selfless about this stuff. Teach, don't patronize. If you kind of go in like that and go, oh, of course your way of working is rubbish, this is what you should do, you're not going to get any far. I made that mistake several times. And be willing to go that extra mile. And I think I realised I feel like I've gone very quickly. But the Agile Academy wasn't a small undertaking, actually. You know, putting together a proper L&D course, actually writing all that material. I think there ended up being about 15 different kind of things that we went through. You know, handouts, takeaways, printed materials, finding the time, finding the space, getting that integrated to L&D, getting it on the shitty intranet site that we've got, excuse my language. You know, all that type of stuff is a lot of effort, but it's worth it. Because now it's there and it exists, and this is like the 3rd year that we're going to be doing an Agile Academy, and we've run it, I think, 3 times at most years since we've kind of put this in place. 3 years, 2 years. It can make a difference, but you've got to be that guy. And leverage your good examples. You know, we kind of refer back to some of those projects, and we finished that replatforming project September last year. It took us about 9 months. There's still some, you know, some other bits that we want to do. You know, want to enhance the component library and kind of do some stuff like that. But you know, when I first joined, we were 10th on kind of what's called ComStore rankings. If anyone's familiar, that's the rankings that in the newspaper industry or the media industry. We were 10th 2 years ago. Now we're first. We beat the Daily Mail, which I don't think is that great, but hey, we beat the Daily Mail. We're first now, right? And a large part for that is because of the technology that we put in. Whether editorial want to accept it or not, it's because of the huge growth that we had from a digital perspective, and we wouldn't be able to do that unless we'd gone through that process. So I can turn around quite bluntly now and say, you see that? That's because we did that in the right way. Don't make the same mistakes again and do something different. I can teach you, I can show you, but let's kind of go through that journey. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to me ramble and all the shitty jokes.